least that. I'm not hearing her at all. Or I guess that's probably because the music is just really bad. I'm not sure. Makes me worried though. Thank you for setting that. Appreciate it. Let's play around with the white balance on all of them. Now's the time to do it. About a minute.
I was just matching everything for that one. So test mics, test mics, test mics. Just do a test, just a quick test, audio test.
Test.
I'm not getting it.
Okay.
Just keep going, keep talking.
This test.
Are we?
Do you have to change that thing on here?
Huh?
Do you have to change that thing on here for the audio?
No, it's working. It's there.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm hearing that.
Okay.
Why am I not? Keep going.
4, 5, 6, 7.
Is this plugged into the computer?
Yeah.
That is.
53.
All right.
67.
Just want to make sure. Give me an XLR.
Oh, sorry. They're not about it. I should have thought about that.
XLR.
Double check these computers.
Let me see. Check, Zach. Check. I give you the link. Hop on. Listen. All right. On your phone. Just go on the other, please. Yeah, we need cameras on her. Come on, guys. That looks good.
Here's this.
Excuse me. Other side, other side, other side. Put that into line 2 or whatever. Okay. All right, we're gonna get something from that. Huh? All right, let's do a thing. All right.
Okay, are we ready? I think I just got a thumbs up. Okay, hello everyone, welcome. Welcome to our annual storytelling event hosted by yours truly, Barbecue Thornton Company. I am Pam Baker. I have the privilege of being the managing partner at Barbecue Thornton Company. I have had that role for several years now. This is, I think, our 5th annual storytelling event. It's our first opportunity to have a hybrid event. We've done it live, we've done it fully remote, and this year we're trying hybrid. And I think we picked a great topic with resiliency, telling our story of resiliency. You know, last year we talked about telling your story in the pandemic, you know, how to come out of it. But clearly, in Delaware especially, the nonprofit community has shown that they're resilient, that we are still here. The need is just as great, if not greater, in the times we're facing now with inflation and some of our other issues. Clearly, it is a time for us to be resilient. And so we are thrilled to be able to bring this morning's program to you. Don't forget to vote today, number 1. And then number 2, don't forget to check your Powerball numbers. And after all of that, you know, we'll get into our program. So we wanted to kick off this morning's program with Melissa Galasso. Melissa is a CPA. She is also a national speaker. She works with the nonprofit community extensively. She's a CPA. She also works with the AICPA to really be on the front lines when there are changes in standards, when there's things that the AICPA standard-setting bodies need to understand before they give something new to you, the nonprofit community, to try to understand or try to implement from an accounting standards perspective. So she's very instrumental, very powerful speaker. And it just so happens that this year on National Nonprofit Day, she released her book, Money Matters for Nonprofits, which is a really guide. If you have a board member or a new someone who comes into your organization that maybe doesn't understand financial reporting for nonprofits, Melissa's book is like the go-to. It's a great read. If you're here today, be sure you take a copy with you. If you're remote, we will be sending you a copy as well, but I think you'll find it to be very, very good to speak to the nonprofit person who may know a lot about the mission and understand it, and they do not always understand the financial reporting. So with that, we're going to kick off with our keynote, Melissa, and move into our program. Thanks for coming.
Hello and welcome to BTCPA's annual storytelling event. My name is Melissa Galasso, and I simply cannot think of a better topic or theme for the storytelling event than resilience. If there's one thing that nonprofits have shown over the last few years, it is resilience. And I am so excited to be here with you, even if it is virtually. For those of you who are in the room, I'm giving big hugs to you virtually. And for those of you who are online, big hugs to you as well. So I want to thank you guys so much for inviting me here today and for supporting my new book. Means a ton to me. I love working with nonprofits. And when I was asked to do a little bit of an introduction for your conference today, I couldn't think of a better word to talk about regarding nonprofits over the last few years. I have served on many committees. I am a chair of a nonprofit advisory committee, which is sort of the equivalent to a board without any fiduciary responsibilities, which is quite nice. And I've had the opportunity to serve on the FASB's not-for-profit advisory committee. And one of the things we know from looking at trends and things that are happening in the profession is that resilience is an amazing word. So what does it mean to be resilient? What is resilience? And this comes to us from the dictionary, which is the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties and toughness. And if there's one thing that we know about nonprofits, toughness is it. They have had to pivot. They have had to really have a new look at fundraising. When you can't do in-person events, how do you get creative and still generating that revenue? How do you engage donors when you can't talk to them or be in front of them? How do we go back to the way it was before COVID? Do we want to go back to the way it is? Will we ever see pre-COVID numbers? Have we excelled during COVID because our mission was so compelling to our donor base and we saw new donors come in as a result of the work that we were doing? And so resilience has been a key theme as we go through here. Statistically, we know that there has been increased demand for service, which has outpaced funding in 2021. So as we look back at some of the studies that were done earlier this year, we know that demand for services is definitely outpacing those funding increases, whether that's through fundraising or contributions or exchange revenue. We know that the need and the work that is being done is absolutely critical. And so we know that there's a lot out there today. Financial uncertainties, inflation definitely having a big impact on nonprofits. There's a lot of questions about cash flow coming in, looking at the changing face of donors. We know that we need a stronger board. We know that the board is such a pivotal and elemental, focus. And if we don't have a strong board that can lead, that has a vision, can really ensure that we're on the right path and can hold people accountable, we tend to flounder and we don't get the results that we really should. Obviously, in the Great Resignation and obviously the movement that we're hearing around the country regarding quiet quitting and all of these amazing terms, what we know is finding staff is really hard, and it's really harder if you don't have the funding to be able to support that. And we know burnout is real, people who are overworked because we can't get the funding that we need. And so they're doing the work of so many people, and you can only do that for so long. Obviously, how do we communicate our mission? How do we communicate the work that we're doing, the impact that we're having? What is our brand, right? And brands are not just your logo or trademarks or, little pithy sayings. They're really, when people think of you, what is the emotional attachment that they have? When we think about, obviously, costs related to benefits and insurance, right? There are rising costs everywhere. Inflation's driving up a lot. I know I just got my renewal for 2023 for insurance, and I was like, wow. And so this is something that really is hitting hard for these nonprofits. We know that there's an increased demand, right? So we want to serve. We know our mission. We know the amazing work that we do, and we're struggling to get the finances that we need to support them. And then obviously DE&I really making sure that people understand that importance. But we know the benefit of nonprofits. We know the outcome. We know why we have nonprofits, right? Most nonprofits have programs that serve the general public at over 55%. 45% have programs that focus on people and families below the federal poverty level, making a huge difference for those families. And then again, when we look at historically marginalized groups like Black or African Americans, Latinx, Indigenous, Native American, or Alaskan Native, as well as the LGBTQ plus community. And so often nonprofits are really working with those that really need the most assistance. And so when I think of resilience, I can't think of a better topic. So going along with the theme here, I definitely felt a little resilience writing my first book. It was definitely something that I really wasn't sure exactly how it was going to turn out. But in the grand scheme of things, I'm really pleased that I was able to get this done. Over the years, I've been asked many, many times by my clients, predominantly CPA firms, was there a book I could recommend for CPA, for nonprofit boards, and really, that would help them understand the accounting. And I've read a lot of books in this area. And there are some really phenomenal books. I actually did an article on the amazing books that are out there. But what I found is some of them are so technical that it would drive away a board member. They really don't need to be in the weeds and the debits and credits. And others were really focused on the governance, which is super important. But it didn't really get into the details around the accounting, maybe a chapter at most. And so what I set out to do is to try to tell the story of nonprofits. There's lots and lots of stories throughout this book. There are lots of examples throughout the book. The goal was really to show nonprofit board members the flexibility financial reporting has, but also the responsibility, right? Everybody on the board, not just the treasurer, is responsible for ensuring that we are on the right path. We're asking the right questions of management and the independent accountant. And so I wanted to set it up to be really easy to consume, despite obviously being an accounting book, but really trying to encourage people to ask questions, to delve deeper. And so each chapter has a theme to it. And you'll get to meet lots of really fun people throughout. These are fictional individuals, but they're built on lots of stories that I've experienced over the last few years. And so you'll get to meet different individuals from different types of nonprofits who for mission tons of different nonprofits. Foundation for the Carolinas, really interesting presentation model there. We talked to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They have some great presentation as well. And so for each one, what we wanted to do is really give you a flavor of how you could present financials. That it's not you have to do this a template, but really it's a build and tell your story. And so I think with that whole concept of storytelling, the financial statements are here to help tell the story of the organization, and the disclosures help support that story. And if we do a really good job, that can be used to make decisions and to get more donors and to be able to have a financial story as well. And when we know our finances, we know what we need, we know where we're getting our funds from, we can take a deeper dive. And so Money Matters for Nonprofits is really near and dear to my heart, because I work with CPA firms all around the country and I help them get up to date on what's going on in GAP and GAS and Yellow Book and Uniform Guidance so that they can go out there and support their clients. Right? They're the boots on the ground. They're the people who are helping and supporting nonprofits. And I get to do my part by making sure that they are up to date, that they're aware of what the changes are and what some of the issues we're seeing in practice. I loved talking about gifts in kind. I love talking about the changes that have been going on in the area of single audits and having that opportunity. And so I wanted to be able to give them support for their clients and really a way of bridging the gap in this area. So throughout the book, you're going to find the first chapter really focusing on governance. It's going to give you a little bit of background on what it is that we are trying to do in this area. What does it mean to serve on a board? If it's a fiduciary board, what are those fiduciary responsibilities? We go over the basic financial statements and sort of introduce them, why they're different, why we need so many. We cover the difference between GAAP basis and cash basis. And then we also go on to really think about each of the different financial statements and look at the different elements. Where do they come from? Why are they there? How are they used? And then once we go through each of the financial statements, we look at the statement of functional expenses, which again could be a note disclosure. And then we bring it all together to say, okay, well, how do I evaluate my financial statements? How do I evaluate my nonprofit? How do I know I'm doing a good job? So we introduce KPIs, key performance indicators. We introduce some of the trends that are out there that you could be looking for. You can look at some industry specific information there as well. The footnotes are filled with citations that you can go and look at really great examples. We tried to make this as user-friendly as possible. And then we close with the amazing role of the independent public accountant, whether it's a compilation, whether it's a review service, an audit, a single audit, right? All of the things that they can do. And it closes with this appendix as there is questions that you can talk to your CPA about. Very often, the CPA will present the financial statements and they'll say, okay, any questions? And nobody wants to ask. Either they're unsure, they don't want to look like they're asking a dumb question, or they're just really overwhelmed. And they kind of assume, well, if the treasurer says it's okay and these guys say it's okay, it must be okay. And so they don't take a lot of initiative in this area. And I wanted to give people the opportunity to really embrace questions and to have conversation and have a real two-way conversation with the independent public accountant, regardless of the type of service they're providing, to make sure that they are getting what they need out of these wonderful CPAs all over the country who just do these great works. And so as part of our storytelling, really trying to help these nonprofits envision and make this a much more practical example. No debits and credits, but lots and lots of visuals to help you understand and to help board members really get what their work is, because their work is so important. We see it in the statistics, right? We know the work that nonprofits are doing are necessary. We know we've been through some tough times. We know demand is high. We know that support is low. And so we need to be resilient as we go through this. And so for the next few hours, you guys are going to get an opportunity to hear from all sorts of individuals who are going to help tell a story about the importance of nonprofits, about what's going on. And so I'm hopeful that when you're listening to the new lease accounting rules, you're excited about what that's going to bring to the table and how we're going to really be able to see the impact of this standard on the balance sheet, not necessarily impacting the statement of activities, but really having that impact on the statement of financial position as to what are we locked into. We know bankers have been considering this for years, but now we're going to see it for ourselves. Obviously, looking at succession planning, can't think of a more important topic as we have a retiring generation and just fewer people coming from behind, right? So we have far more births as we look at the birth rates going down, 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 and the boomers trying to retire, and there's not their people behind them. So thinking about cross-training, succession planning. We'll also look at ESG. I'm really excited. Environmental, social, and governance is a hot topic at the NAC. So last time I was in Norwalk, Connecticut, that was one of the key considerations that we were talking about. And so what does that look like from potentially disclosures, but also different financial instruments that are being tied to things like will decrease your interest rate on your loan if you get to 50% women on your board, or if you can reduce your greenhouse gases. And so we're starting to see this. Obviously, authentic DE&I, not check the box DE&I, but really embracing this. Obviously, we can't do the work without endowments and development and that intersection between them. I think that's going to be an amazing topic that you guys are going to get a lot out of, because the silos are what makes nonprofits difficult, right? When we break down those silos and we understand how to work together, that's going to be phenomenal. And then what happens when things don't go according to plan? That's, it'd be nice if everything just worked and you made your budget and your life just went in the right direction. Or you made, your strategic plan and you just keep checking off the boxes because you've been successful. But that's not always, right? It'd be wonderful if everything was unicorns and fairies, but in reality, what do you do? And then obviously, when we look at funding and cash flow, very critical to the organization. So while accrual accounting is not cash basis, it does include a statement of cash, of changes in cash, because we need to know about that cash flow, right? The cash flow statement helps us understand the inflows and outflows that aren't necessarily tied, whereas the statement of activities helps us understand what's already been incurred but not yet spent, or, we've written that check but it hasn't cleared the bank yet. That doesn't mean that we still have that money. And so you have to really have both to tell that story. And so you have an amazing lineup of speakers today. You're going to have great topics. You're going to really have an opportunity to dive into the really nitty-gritty, meaty details. And so your lineup is phenomenal, the topics that you're covering. Hopefully you'll leave here today invigorated and really appreciating the resilience that we've experienced, and hopefully looking forward at a much more optimistic look with some of the topics that you have today. You're prepared to march forward into somewhat uncertain waters and really do the best that we can, because if we don't have these nonprofits, a lot of people would suffer, right? The impact that we see is just super important. So I want to thank you guys for having my book today at your conference. I hope you guys enjoy it. I would love feedback. This is my contact information. This is my email. Feel free to shoot me an email or, let me know what you think. Reach out on LinkedIn. I'm very active there, and I would love to hear your thoughts. So thank you guys so much. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day, and here's to wonderful storytelling. Thanks, guys.
Great way to kick us off. Our next speaker is Bill Dugdale. As they load your presentation up for you, Bill, call you up here. So Bill is private wealth advisor with A.P. Bernstein. He has spoken at our conference before, and he has a great way of making it sound simple.
Just go for it.
He's going to talk to us a
Give him
little bit
say,
more about
"Hey,
that
I'm
ESG.
working
He's going to
for
delve
just
into that
one
topic a
little
little bit
statement
more.
on
So,
Jim's slides."
Bill, I'll turn it
Just
over
help.
to you, and thanks for
Did
being
you use
here
this?
today.
Yeah, if you try it, but if not, just tell us the
Thank
point
you,
first,
Pam.
changing slides.
Let's see if I can do this whole thing. As Pam said, my name is Bill Dugdale. I'm with A.P. Bernstein. My clients are largely business owners that are selling clients with complexity, but also nonprofits. And I'm very invested personally in the nonprofit community. I just stepped down as chair of the board of the Delaware Community Foundation. I'm on the board of managers for the Moores Children's Hospital, pilot school, and St. Michael's School and Nursery. So a little bit of a reporter right now, but it really is important to me. So responsible investing and ESG, and telling a story of resilience. So there needs to be some resilience in just digging through all of the terminology that's out there. And I think the one that resonates a lot with people today, because we're hearing it a lot, is ESG. So ESG stands for environmental, social, and governance. If we could move forward one slide, that's perfect. So many people still have kind of a historical view of ESG or responsible investing. We heard it referred to as tree hugging. I think that there was an understanding for many, many years that you could align your values with your investing, but you were giving up some return. And I think that's changed a lot. The current approach really is integrating ESG, environmental, social, and governance, in the research process, and trying to quantify and incorporate ESG to determine the direct financial impact on companies. I was actually, for 18 years in my career, I was an equity researcher, portfolio manager for a local firm called Freeze Associates. And so I spent all day talking to CEOs and CFOs of publicly traded companies and trying to determine the best investments. And much of that research really was trying to uncover the great things that were going on in companies, but also to kind of avoid making mistakes. So we care about earnings, we care about revenues, we care about the management team, we care about all of the financial metrics that are out there. ESG didn't really come into play, but as we know, there's headliners if you're doing things that aren't responsible. Today, we're more focused, and that's a big part of it, avoiding risk and helping to not make mistakes. So I kind of wish that was part of my process, because maybe I would have avoided some mistakes in the companies that I was investing in if I had known that they really were focused on environmental, social, and government issues. But today, in the current approach, there are dual aims. So companies are trying to advance ESG issues and generate financial returns. And when I say companies, I mean investment firms. So actively researching to identify ESG as a contributor to stronger financial metrics, things like margins, things like sales, things like enterprise value. So I can, of course, go into detail on some of those things, but let's go. Okay, perfect. So what's driving this evolution? Of course, investors. They realize that ESG factors are, in fact, financial factors. We're beginning to realize that, and that they can actually improve risk and return. Clients care about it as well. They want to do more than their capital. They want to align their investments with their values, and a desire to have impact and change. But I think more importantly today, they're not willing to sacrifice return, and they're realizing that they don't have to. Now, for instance, this year, any ESG strategy is likely underperforming the benchmark, but leading up to the downturn that we've seen, at least at AB Bernstein where I work, our ESG or responsible investment strategies were actually in line with benchmarks or outperforming them. Largely this year, they've underperformed because they don't have exposure to traditional energy, oil and gas. They're more focused on the technology of getting away from those things. So it's led them to underperform in the short term. That's something that we can talk about. But I think that the 5 years leading up to this showed that you no longer necessarily have to sacrifice. And of course, the regulators are starting to step in, and I think that's likely a good thing. If we could go to the next slide, please. So there's a range of ESG-focused strategies, and it's very broad. So there's historical SRI, so socially responsible investing. Largely, this is negative screening, right? So going through companies and just excluding, oil and gas, alcohol, tobacco, or positive screening, things that are driving health, energy efficiency, and such. Then there's ESG integration in the middle, evaluating all the material ESG risks and opportunities and incorporating them into an investment process. And then there's the ESG strategies themselves, where they're truly integrating it into their investments philosophy. Let's go on to the next slide. So again, kind of where there's a broad range here. And as we look at the investment team structures at many of these firms that our clients might hire, or AB Bernstein, there's those that rely on the third party. So there are ratings agencies, and there are exchange traded funds where they literally have qualified as ESG. Now, one of the problems is that more than 80% of the S&P companies have somehow figured out a way to qualify as ESG. So are they really environmentally and socially governance being responsible in those ways? Or maybe not. So we might have to be a little bit skeptical of any kind of rating when 80% of the companies qualify. It's interesting, ESG for this reason has almost become kind of political. And I think it's important for us to step away from that, because it really is, I don't want to say a financial metric, but it's a metric research process. So then in the middle, there's firms where they're doing their regular research, and then there's kind of a central team that looks through all of that research and says, well, here's the companies that our investment professionals like, which ones kind of are ESG compatible or can jump through these hoops. And I think on the side that's evolving the most, and this is kind of where AB Bernstein falls, is leveraging the ESG team and the investment partners to really build it into the process. So for instance, at AB Bernstein, in our strategies, really in all of our strategies, even if they aren't labeled ESG, these metrics are really integrated into every decision that we make. So my humble feeling is that's the way it should be done. I really believe that someday we won't even label this as ESG. It will just be thought of as smart investing. How could you invest in companies that don't care about these things? So trends. So this is a clear secular trend. This is not a fad, but it's an evolution right now, and hence all of the terminology and pushback. There really is a desire for ESG integrated portfolios. It's global. It's different in every region. And all stakeholders are contributing to this journey. Asset owners are really demanding strategies that meet their financial and ESG goals. So I don't think this slide is up there, but if anybody would like to see it, we kind of have a handout We give to nonprofits
Yeah, we're-
and people that are thinking about these things.
Yeah, that's why.
You know,
So
5
thank you.
questions to kind of get started. What's the roadmap? How do we get there? You know, so I think there's some questions that we should be asking our clients. You know, what are your priorities for responsible investing? How do you want to reflect your values or your organization's mission in the investment portfolio? Are you invested with portfolio managers who actively engage with companies on ESG issues? How will you measure the dimension of the responsibility? And does responsible investing mean accepting lower return potential? And again, we think it should not have to. So I think I'll keep it short and sweet. I did want to say that you know, certainly I can give you this handout because it's more detail than just the questions. But one of my colleagues, Jennifer Good, in our Wealth Strategies, team, again, B.B. Bernstein is a global investment and research firm. We run a bank. We're unconflicted. When I was on the research side of the industry, I loved B.B. Bernstein's research on individual companies because we aren't an investment bank and we're not conflicted. Our Wealth Strategies team, that's designed for our private client group. Their history is also based in research. And Jennifer Good just put out, with a couple other colleagues, put out a very good white paper, really focused on, is ESG investing compatible with being a fiduciary? She is actually going to be here in Wilmington speaking at the Estates Planning Council of Delaware on March the 8th. If anybody would like to attend, we'd love to have you. I also have a recorded webinar with Jennifer and her colleagues if anybody would be interested. And we of course have the white paper. So I think we'll leave it at that. If there's any questions, I can try to answer them.
Thank you, Bill. That's great. I love the way you just kind of break it down. You know, a little more understandable. I know it's such a buzzword, right? ESG is such a buzzword, but it really means something. And I think that Bill did a great job of kind of telling us that. I also have some of the details in reference, and so we'll send them out as a follow-up today to anyone that participated. So with that, let's move on to our next topic. As Melissa referenced in referencing her book, sometimes there's the accounting rules and there's something new and it gets integrated and it may mean something to you and your board and it may just be a nuisance. However, it's important to do it right. And then she mentioned, I love how she said the auditors come in and we are really there to help you and to promote you and to help you tell your story financially. Sometimes there are just, you know, accounting rules that you just have to understand a little bit about. And so our next speaker is going to help you to understand a little bit more about a new standard. It is a requirement. Everybody's going to have to address it. And it's probably going to be pretty across the board applicable because it has to do with the way you record leases, right? So right now, a lot of you probably lease space. It could have an impact on what goes on your financial statements. And so you really do want to know if you're going to have something go on your financial statements, you're going to want to understand it. So Jeff Kowalczyk, our partner with Barbecue Thornton Company, is going to come up next, and he is going to make it very easy for you to understand the accounting rules associated with new lease accounting.
Thank you very much, everybody who's here, for everybody who is watching us online. I'm delighted to be here to talk about lease accounting and what it's going to mean for your organizations, other organizations that you work with, and what it's going to mean for boards and other stakeholders. So the technical name for the new lease standard is Financial Accounting Standards Board Accounting Standards Codification 42. FASB ASC 42. Basically what it means is that, except for certain short-term leases, all leases that are held by your organization of tangible items are going to be reflected as an asset and a liability on your books, beginning with December 31st, 2020 to financial statements. Essentially, it's for years beginning after December 15th, 2021, but what that means in practice is years ending December 2022 or later. So you will reflect an intangible right of use asset and a related liability. There are a few things that are excluded. So as I mentioned, very short-term leases that are less than 12 months, you have the ability as a class of leases to exclude them from this treatment. That means if you exclude some of the short-term leases, you do need to exclude all of them. You can't include certain short-term leases because you want to, and then exclude others. So it has to be done for all short-term leases as a whole. There are also things like intangible cloud computing arrangements that don't meet the definition of a lease. And these leasing rules also do not apply to leases of inventory, leases of things like timber and mineral rights, and leases of assets that are under construction. And then who needs to know? Essentially, everybody needs to know. And I'm going to try to. If I can get it to stay in one place without making noise, that's probably so hopefully I'm still loud enough. But the truth is, everyone in your organization is going to need to know about it for potentially different reasons. So obviously, financial personnel need to be aware of the change the way that your books are maintained throughout the year, but also executives, board members, and other people within your organization are, are going to also need to be aware because there might be some changes in the way they need to communicate about your organization. Especially if you are an organization that has a lot of leases, all of a sudden, your liabilities may have grown significantly during the year. And that may require some communication, both to your executives and to outside parties, vendors, grantors. So I don't know who in this room or who online has loans with banks that have requirements that you maintain a certain asset to liability ratio or other near-term financial ratios. It's really important if you do that you're reaching out and talking to the bank about how they are interpreting these leases. Because if they're going to start calling these debt or liabilities that impact your ratios, you may, without any change in your operations, suddenly have some issues with meeting the covenants of your loans. And so this is a discussion to have sooner rather than later, because I think most banks are going to be reasonable about it, but I think they're more reasonable about it if you're not handing them your audited financial statement and telling them that it changed. If you're talking to them in advance and saying, we know this is a change. If it's theoretically, the asset and liability should be similar enough in value that it shouldn't put you from a positive position to a negative position. But if you're required to have a 1.1 to 1.0 assets to liability ratio, it could mess with the ratio like that. So if you talk to them, maybe there's an amendment to the loan agreement that changes that ratio to account for the changes in your operations as a result of reflecting the leases. Maybe there is something there. But it's really important to have that discussion earlier. So talking about the financial statements, the lease liability, right now, on nonprofit financial statements, there are two types of leases. There are operating leases and capital leases. The capital leases have historically been reflected liability, whereas operating leases are just expense when paid and shown in a note disclosure. Moving forward, the items that were disclosed as operating leases in the note disclosure are now also going to be on the financial statements, but they're not going to be on the financial statements at the exact value that they were disclosed, because the disclosure was of future cash flow payments, and we're going to be showing future present value payments. So the present value is going to be a little lower, potentially a fair amount lower, depending on what interest rates do, than the full future cash payment. The lease asset is also going to be reflected at the same present value, but then it'll be adjusted for any prepayments or other things along those lines. Okay, so the other thing that's going to be impacted is your statement of changes in operations. So historically, all be straight line adjusted over the life of the lease. So you will see some slight changes in your net income as a result of this change. For finance leases, it's going to be similar, but we'll be amortizing and then reflecting an interest expense cost for the calculated interest portion. Because we're just doing a brief overview today, I won't go into those calculations, but I'm more than happy to. So take advantage. And then we can go to the next one. Sorry, Evan. So transition. So the prior period adjustment upon implementation. There will be, because we need to get your opening net assets in the position they would have been, had you always been reflecting these leases as assets and liabilities, there will likely be a small opening balance adjustment. The reason for that is because for operating leases, we're showing that single expense over the life of the lease. There'll be slight differences between that and your actual cash outflows, and that difference is going to be what your change to opening net assets is. So it's probably going to be small for most organizations, but it will exist. As I mentioned, the rent expense is going to be a little different from rent paid. Some organizations that have significant differences between their cash outflows for rent and in month A versus month B versus month C already do some work to try to make more of a straight line adjustment. But those who don't have major differences haven't historically. So you may see a change. There's also going to be enhanced financial statement disclosures, as with every new accounting standard. So we'll add another note in. We'll work with you to develop that. It's going to provide more information about the rates used to calculate present value, as well as future outflows and payments. Some of that stuff is already in there, but build that a little bit. And here's the last one that I wanted to highlight. If you are a smaller organization that files Form 990-EZ and you're near the asset limit, this might push you over and require you to file the full Form 990. So that is one thing just to be highly aware of, because if you're a December year-end organization, you don't want to file and then have it rejected, or realize right before the filing date that you need to file a different form that frankly is a huge step up as far as complexity. So please, 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 what you can do today, if you haven't already, is make sure that you're aware of all the leases that are in place during your current fiscal year, whether they're new, whether they're ongoing, whether they're in their 5th renewal clause. We want to make sure that those are aggregated and that those are assessed to make sure that we are capturing everything. I will say, because I see at least one person writing this down, if you have leases that are like within your entity and they're 1 year, but they're sort of evergreen, as long as you write them so that it has to be a new lease every year, it doesn't automatically carry over unless action is taken. There will be short-term and be able to be excluded. But it does mean when you're writing leases, especially if it's a lease that is written as short-term, you want to make sure that the terms are clear, that the lease instrument that you're holding can't be automatically renewed without action. Because we don't want to get anybody in trouble. I forget if I have one more slide or if that's the last one. Is that the last one? So I will leave you with this. Like Pam said, sometimes we do things because they're really important. Sometimes there's something that is important to other organizations and is more of a nuisance to your organization. I will say for nonprofits, the leases really are, for most nonprofits, more of a nuisance type transaction, because this came out of the Financial Accounting Standards Board looking at multinational corporations and other big industrial organizations that use lease accounting to keep assets off their books and to keep liabilities off their books. And they said, we don't want that. And this was a trickle-down effect. So this standard has been in place for public companies for a number of years. It was actually for non-public and non-profit organizations, it was delayed twice. Once because people were still arguing about the complexity, and then a second time because of the pandemic. The good news is a lot of the bugs have been worked out. They've already made like 4 or 5 amendments to get rid of stuff that didn't quite work right. But I know for a lot of organizations, it's going to feel more like a nuisance than a value that you're providing to your organizations. And I want you to just keep in mind that even if it feels like a nuisance, if there's one person that you work, one grantor, one ledger that gets value out of this, then that is bringing value to your organization. And you may never hear from that person, hey, this gave me a lot better understanding of what you do and what your scope is and how you work. But if it changes one mind, there's value. All right, thank you all.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jeff. As always, Jeff has this ability to take a complicated accounting standard and make it understandable. So I know that he brings that value to a lot of his clients. I also know that he gets bugged a lot by younger staff. With that second explanation. Okay, so next up we have on our schedule a 10-minute break. Why don't we break? Well, actually, we are on schedule. We're actually on schedule. So if you're online, take a moment to have a restroom break, grab another cup of coffee. If you're here in the room, stay, grab another cup of coffee. Take a couple minutes. If there's somebody, look around before you get up. If there's someone in here that you don't know, go introduce yourself. Maybe meet someone new. Maybe talk about some of the topics we've already had this morning, and then we'll start promptly back at 5 minutes after 10. Okay? we don't You bring it home. Okay, I think we're back in business. We were having so much fun talking. For those that are here live, I hope if you're online, you found someone to have a chat with, or at least got a cup of coffee. So we'll jump back into our program. Next up is Monica Boda. She's going to talk about DE&I. And all I can tell you is, as you're learning more about Monica, is when she and I first talked about the seminar, and she said, well, what are you looking for? And I started to talk, and then she started to talk, and then I started to talk, and we just had so much fun, like 45 minutes. So how she's gonna do in 15 minutes, what she could do is spend all day, and good luck with that. She's great. So Monica, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Hello, good morning, everyone. That good? Okay. All right. Great, welcome. So my session today is on resiliency around DE&I. So, but it's going to focus on three key constituents, which is DE&I within the organization, which is your employees, your staff, your board members. We're going to talk about impact on learners, and it's going to talk about your community, DE&I. How do you manage as an organization the experiences in those three key areas? So let's talk about your organization. Incorporating DE&I into your organization goes obviously beyond just your mission statement on your website, your DE&I commitment on your website. It's actually how you bring people on board, what their experiences are. It's not just a mission statement or a cultures and values statement. It goes beyond all of that. It means hiring a diverse workforce. That's just the first step, like I said. You have to ultimately empower every single person on the ground to truly represent your mission. So I added the B belonging to the DE&I. Building a culture of belonging is where everyone feels accepted and welcome, where they truly feel at home and they can be their authentic self. That's where the work resides. That's resiliency. That's where we're going. So when you talk about DE&I and the B is missing, this is the work. So I had to weave that in. And as you put your plans together, if you've ever put your plan together, like I know you have, you are often advised to start with the end goal in mind. What is that end goal? Resiliency. And resilience, I'm sorry, back up. Belonging is that angle of the D&I. And you need resiliency to do that. And then you can make your way forward. Okay, I need diverse people to do that. I need inclusivity to do that. I need to treat them right and be equitable as how I manage all of that. When you do all three right, resiliency is a no-brainer. It falls in place. You don't have to do too much work there. It just happens because you're managing all the other three great. But to do this, you can't do this without sharing stats, right? So I don't want to touch on some numbers. But what I have found is when you share statistics, sometimes we fall into the space of, oh my gosh, I'm so behind, because we're looking at all the things that we're not doing right. These are huge stats, I can't do that, I'm not there. What I have chosen to do today is to tell you all the positives, all the reasons why. So you do have to see some stats, right? So you can see why diverse cultures are important. Why do we need to, why does diversity, equity, and inclusion matter for nonprofits? Diverse and inclusive organizations outperform their peers by so much, capture new markets by 70%. See concepts to fruition by 76%. Outperform on profitability by 36%. Improved decision-making, 87%. Improved positive impact on performance, 87%. These are compelling numbers. So I don't think this were ever lost on any of us here. We know how important it is to have a diverse, equitable, and inclusive workforce, right? Organizations. However, how do we remain resilient? How do we keep it going? So there is a slide that isn't there, but I will just give you a quick summary. This is a more detailed description of diversity, equity, inclusion, and equality. But diversity is simply a fact. It is a head count, it's a number. Like Melissa said earlier, it is a check mark. We are a diverse organization. We have this many diverse members on our team. Equity is a choice. Inclusion is an action. And we all know when you are in action, you get results. Belonging is the outcome of all three done well. All right, okay, so this is not the most recent, but that's okay. So there is a famous quote I have to share. This is from Maya Angelou. Courage is the most important of all values because without courage, you can't practice any other virtue consistently. When we go into conversation around DE&I, you need courage to engage in those conversations. So, be it your diverse community or your majority community, it is not an easy conversation to be in. It takes courage to get into these deep, sometimes uncomfortable conversations. So it's important to put that breastplate of courage on when you start to get into these conversations. I have walked my way through that. It's not easy for anyone. But once you get there, what would it take to keep that going? So hence the resilience triangle. So I'm going to share some tools today that will help you. So I don't want to spend too much time on the stats and what hasn't worked and what's going on in the community. Let's talk about, we know we need to keep this going. Let's talk about the tools and resources to help us keep that going. And frameworks are always wonderful to be in this conversation. So the resilience triangle is a good one. And Melissa did a good job of contrasting where she did define resilience. But what I'm going to do is contrast resilience with presence. So Resilience is a system to successfully recover from hardships consisting of several interrelated elements such as family and community. And then presence is how we manage our attention directly. And that impacts resilience. That's why presence is key. An internal state that creates awareness in the moment, both what's going on internally and in our external environment. And you need the presence to manage resilience. So presence, as it says here, produces a portal to resilience. So resilience is not a crisis skill. It is a life skill. It's about growing through challenges and opportunities to become stronger, wiser, and more skilled in the process. So let's talk about the resilience triangle. It comprises of 3 legged stools: mindset, energy, and action. Any one of those not present, this will not work. You can't lack any one of those tools. You need all 3 to be present. So now let's dig into each of those. The mind is the most powerful equipment we have as human beings. How we feed it, how we manage it, how we tell it, is what gives us the outcome that we see. How we respond to the environment, what is happening when it comes to DEI, all of the crises that we experienced a few years back. It is so important to be able to manage that mind. So resilience is cultivated as a mindset. Resilience is a life skill that needs to be exercised. And just like growing a plant, it takes tilling the soil, weeding what doesn't belong, feeding the plant and nurturing it. 95% studies have shown that 95% of what we do is fed to us by our subconscious mind. And 5% is what we do when we are awake. Just imagine that and active. So what we feed the mind subconsciously is what carries us through. So it's important, and that's where resilience resides. When you work hard at this and you feed the mind consistently, then you're able to operate and move to that place of not weary, not wondering, how am I going to make it through this? You just find yourself being in action around what's important to continue to nurture this feeling, to continue to nurture the experience, not just for your teams, not just for your donors, but for your communities as well. I say consistency leads to proficiency. So if you practice this consistently, it gets you to be proficient and resilient in showing up in respective communities. So let's talk about energy and action. Energy is often a rapid and unexpected change. Energy takes energy. So it can drain you, it can feed you, depends on what you feed it. So how do you replenish your energy and the resources to continue to do the work that you do around the end? Where do you get that energy from? These are questions to ponder, because it has to do with your respective organizations. How do we continue to keep this going? We know it's good work, we know it's important work. That's why you're here. Anybody in this audience, both in person and online, you know you're here because this is important. How do you keep this going? So we're here to just share some resources to help you continue to do that. And then action activates resilience. A resilience mindset and tons of energy are great. However, very little gets improved when there's no action. You can put a beautiful plan together, but when you don't feed it with the right information and you don't put the right action in place, you don't get results. So all are equally weighted. You need the mindset first, you need the energy to keep driving this, and you need to be in action around the plans that you put in place. So So one more framework to help us do this. The first framework, which is the resilience triangle, speaks to everything and everyone. Your internal organization, your donors, your community, absolutely. But this is about your leadership, transformation, and sustainability. You have to inform the head as the leader. You have to engage the heart and enable the hands. This is your work to do as leaders. It is not enough to just give the information. Information does not transform anyone. Action is where transformation is. So you do want to inform the head, give them the information to do the work as leaders. You want to engage the heart and enable the hands by giving them the tools and resources to actually get the work done. And where do you find all of that? So some information, so other than just reading up on research and God knows all kinds of resources online, I thought it would be helpful to talk to local CEOs and some outside of the state to see what's going on with this. How are we navigating through the last couple of years? Well, here's the reveal. After the murder of George Floyd and the convergence of social, political, health, and wellness, etc., were all challenged, we found that the height of action, because everybody in crisis, what do? We jump into action. And what's next? We move to overcorrection. And so companies and nonprofits, some created CDOs, Chief Diversity Officer, a one-man in that shop with no support system, right? Because we want to make sure we're compliant. Again, check mark. So how do you sustain that? Right? So those were some reviews. So the crisis, at the height of all of this, the energy and fervor is now starting to tail off. When it was right and present and everybody was talking about it, yes, we had action, we had support system, we sought support system to help us do this. But where are we today with this? It's starting to win. And that's because there is no risk. We haven't built the resilience to sustain this. So how do we move from crisis state that propels us to action automatically? And then when the crisis tails, what do? We go back to business as usual. How do we build that so we continue to keep this front and center? Only very few people can stay in that height of euphoria or in despair. We all can have those peaks and valleys. But you need to come back to status quo, business as usual. How do you get there? You build resilience. That's how you come back to your subconscious and you just operate from there. You know exactly what to do when. So we need more concerted efforts, the CEO tells me, in order to make measurable progress. We need concerted efforts to make measurable progress front and center. So that means you can't do this alone. Not just your internal team, not just with your donors, not just with your community. You have organizations locally and nationally to help you sustain your plans. So let's talk about donors. Here are some things that some local nonprofits are doing. They're being very intentional. Now, this is risky because the lifeline of any nonprofit is what? Your donors, your support system. So how do you challenge that support system and continue to function? But this organization says to me, we pay close attention to our supply and diversity. They have actually put 25% of their budget into minority suppliers, and they're being very intentional about it. 25%, that is a lot. But they're holding everyone accountable to that number. And then there's a public review of the various factions of the hate groups. So you're not wondering who the hate groups are. Where are they? You know where they are now. So you can decide, do I want to do business with them? Do I want to get their support? they can make a decision whether they want to do that or not. Whatever that decision, be ready to live with it. Just know that you are going to win some and you are going to lose some in the process. Well, be prepared for that. But as you lose who you don't want and who you don't want to do business with, you are going to improve who comes into your space, who you engage with the right mission statement, with the right declaration, and being very intentional and declarative about it, you make the right progress. Now let's talk about the community. Recognize that this is a journey for your community. Understand the value system, partner with local nonprofits. Dana is in the room, and he tells me they have a report coming out locally that you can probably get, if you're connected with Dana, you will have the access to that information. And several others. United Way is in the room, YWCA, several organizations that you can partner with in the community help you bring this home. You are not alone. So it can be daunting when it's just you doing this, but you have the support system. So tap into that. Again, recognize that this is a long game. It is not a one and done. Resiliency and belonging is a long game. So now that you've heard all this, so what have you learned? So what is the significance of the learning? Now, what are you going to do with the information? It's a lot of information you're getting today. I don't expect personally that you will implement everything. But if you've taken the time to be here, and thanks to Pam and company for putting this together to prepare resources for you, you want to walk away with some resources to say, this is the one thing that's going to be different today. When I walk out of here, how do I sustain my diversity, equity, inclusion, and by the way, belonging to my organization? That's your goal. Whether you talk about it today or not, that is where resilience resides. Because when it's done right, that's where everybody goes. Somebody walks into your organization, they get it. This is the culture here. Everybody feels at home. You don't have to say too much. So think about what that will look like. The last couple of slides are just resources. I don't know how much time we have left. It's really so Pam can share. Couple more. So Pam can share some of these tools and resources to help you continue to sustain your diversity. It is the inward and the outward. What you do inward is simply how you bring people on board, how you onboard them, be it paid or unpaid staff. They all need to be given the tools and support to do this work. When you invest in them, they will carry your mission forward for you. And the outward is really how you engage with the community. What are your goals as in the community? Is it well known? Is it well spelled out? Do people know what your stand is about this? I'm not going to spend time on this because I've pretty much touched on this, but I do want to go to some serving the community looks different. Okay, this is a good one. Let me wrap with that. So progress looks different for everyone. So don't look to one that is doing well and say, oh wow, how do I match that? It's not for you to keep up with the Joneses. It's for you to really figure out what your mission is, how you want to articulate that in the community, and how you want to bring that to fruition for you. But it is very different for everyone. So again, start small. Ask, what do you mean by that when a coworker uses outdated or offensive language? It's showing up as your authentic self and openly mentioning your partner in a group setting. Gradually, the presence of diverse voices and identities displays will impact a company's culture. Again, engage your allies to aid your advocacy. Last but not the least, life beyond resiliency. I will skip this and pass that on. One more. Yes, this I don't want to touch on. Really creating a safe space for conversation. Creating policies and procedures that prohibit racism and discrimination in the workplace. provide regular ongoing DE&I training. Now, you will have some employees that may roll their eyes at you and say, I've been through this training. I was one of those 20 years ago. Why would I need a diversity, equity, and inclusion? Then it was diversity and inclusion. Why would I need that? I can tell you all the ways that I intersect. Female, Black, foreign, absent. I counted about 5. Why do I need training? God knows, by the time I came out of that training, 5 days later, I was completely transformed. We all have biases, conscious or unconscious. First, recognize where that resides. That's where your work starts, as leaders of this message. If you're carrying this message, you have to be it. Otherwise, your community, your donors, your employees, your leaders, they're not going to buy it. They will sniff it out. They will know this is just a check mark for you. So find your place on this continuum. The D is beaten. It is overused. Go to the equity, go to the inclusivity, go to the belonging. Find how you can get that ingrained into your system. The D is inevitable because you are going to hire diverse voices. But they walk right out the door where you don't have the equity, where you don't have the inclusion, where you don't have the belonging. And that's not where you want to be. Last one. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I love that, all of the topics today are bringing us back to, it's time to just do something, right? To do something about all these things because they're here, they're part of our world, and we aren't just nonprofits who eventually have to catch up with everybody. We're going to make a difference in the world, increase donors, increase money coming into us, just in time for Dave Biddle to come up here and talk to us about that, talk about endowments intersecting with development, which I know everybody in the world is looking for development people right now. So Dave's got some great pointers coming up. Dave Biddle, Biddle Capital Management President and CEO. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right, thank you so much. First, if you don't mind, just for a second, I just want to acknowledge Pam again for all the hard work that goes into this this whole project. She does a great job. The firm is really committed to this. I enjoy this every year. This is great. So thank you for putting all this on. I think it's a great share of information. What I wanted to talk a little bit about was in the vein of resiliency. Recently, my firm has had a number of nonprofits create endowments from scratch. So this is their starting endowment. They called us, how do we do it? How does it function? And it's always nice kind of when you start from the beginning because you go over all the basics again. And one of the interesting things about nonprofits is that although they do different things and different missions, they are a complex business, but there are themes that go through them. And we heard earlier this concept of silos. You have different silos that start to be established, and sometimes they separate, they don't necessarily speak with each other. So when I'm talking with nonprofits about endowment stuff, I talk to them a little bit about how do you combine this? How do you make the endowment management connect with the gifts that are coming in through development? Okay? Now, I'm not going to spend time on this whole slide, don't worry. I just wanted to show you, this is a graphic that we use to describe the fiduciary practice and the best practices for running an endowment and managing an endowment. Number 5 is support development. So that's what I'm going to talk a little bit about just real quick today. Next slide. All right, endowment assets. Why do we care about endowment assets? Are they important? Are they not important? For most nonprofits, they're pretty important. And if you don't have an endowment in your nonprofit, you probably want one. So this whole concept, if we look at everything we've been through the last few years, I'm really encouraged that we have all these nonprofits that are creating this and taking this step. One of the things that we talk about is income that's not based on operations. Right? So maybe the easiest example of this is like a private school. So endowment income comes to their cash flow, irrespective of how many kids are coming in the door. Right? And so that can be good because it can create a stabilization factor for the nonprofit. Endowment assets can be reserved if there's a big project or there's critical thing that happens within COVID might be an example of that. What do we can use as resources? Those assets are generally conditionally restricted as a general rule. So that means that a board could move to use those assets for emergency projects or strategic projects. And obviously it's there to support the mission. So how does this connection work? Next slide, please. All right. I figured that I wouldn't go too deep into neurology and brain function because I can't imagine people would sign up for a seminar that's neurology and accounting. I kind of see that as you're going to blow a lot of fuses in that scenario, but I'm going to talk about a little bit of it, if you'll allow me, right? So I say that gifts are like algebra. They need to balance. The right side and the left side of the equals need to be equal, and they need to be, there's a formula on each side of that, for that equation. So the impact of a gift and the prudence of a gift really need to be equal. And that's what we're going to talk about. Larger gifts require more prudence, right? I know you all in here have great nonprofits, you do wonderful things, and if I'm going to give you a gift of $100, I feel great about that gift. If I'm going to give you a gift of $100,000, I might want some more information, right? There's just more risk involved in that process. And so what we want to try to do on the development side is to try to assist you a little bit and show you how to have those conversations so that you can deal with that difference of scale between $100 and $100,000. Okay. There is always buyer's remorse. Never forget it, right? I may love your nonprofit. I may think it's fantastic. And they go through months and months and months of discussions. And then finally I write that $100,000 check. It's impossible for me to leave that meeting and not think, did I do the right thing? Right? So just recognize it. Just know that it's there. All right. Next slide, please. So why do donors make a gift? And it's pretty simple. They have a connection with your nonprofit. They have a connection with your mission. You know what you do, why you do it. Maybe they know somebody who's benefited from the mission of the nonprofit. Those connections are emotional connections. And they happen in the right side of your brain. And they happen very, very quickly. All right? It's very easy for, you've probably seen it. You just explain what the mission is for your nonprofit, and then somebody starts asking questions. How do you do this? How do you do that? How long have you been doing it? And how did you start doing it? That's the right brain firing, saying, okay, that's the emotional side, and then buying into what you're doing. Next slide. The question is, when do they write the check? All right. And this is what's important, and this is, I think, the part that people need to think about. It's really about the other side of your brain, your left brain, your logic brain, equalizing that algebraic equation. So they can have a lot of passion, but they also need to realize, I'm doing the right thing, this is prudent. There's going to be value to this. And it's really about stewardship. And I'm trying to show you a way to add a little bit of extra stewardship reflection to your development process. Let's go to the next slide. So how do we do this? How do I put these two pieces together? Stewardship, you want to share the management process of your endowment with donors. Okay? Now, I'm not saying your development people need to be investment experts. That's not at all what I'm saying. And I'll show you some tips in order to help that out. But I think if you can have a story to it, we as humans love stories. That's our most primitive part of our brain, talking about how we get information is through stories. So to be able to say, this is the story of our endowment, this is the story of how we take care of your gift for many, many years going forward, is an important story that needs to be told. Duration, I like this one. So reflect endowment successes. So I love for your development people to be able to say, you know what, we had this project that we really wanted to do. We developed a process to gain funds for it, and we funded it, and look what happened. Again, that's both sides of your brain. That's the right side of the brain and the left side of the brain going into a full circuit saying, oh, this was a successful process. That brings most donors comfort. Obviously, the emotion, discuss the mission, the benefit. We had a lot of emotion over the last couple of years, right, with all these changes for nonprofits and challenges. Just tell the stories. I think that's really, really important. Connection. If you can show how you specifically created impact for the people that your nonprofit benefits, that's really critical. It's really, really critical because it helps drive that circuitry within the brain. So the right brain and the left brain have to be able to both say yes to the gift. Right? And it helps if there's a story. That's really important because the story is what makes the brain feel comfortable in saying yes to both of those things. So this isn't rocket science. This isn't anything that's really special. But maybe I'm just reminding you to connect these two items, connect these two silos that probably exist in the finance committee and they exist somewhere else in development. They may not be communicating with each other in the right way. So what are some tips? How do we actually do this? Pam knows I always like to give tips at the end of these presentations so that you can just write a few things down, take it back, and have practical application of things. Okay, have development involved with the investment committee. Everybody in the investment industry is going, oh, there's more people in the meetings. Not the case. Your endowment or your development folks don't need to be investment professionals, and you shouldn't ask them to do that. But typically, every nonprofit will have a bit of an annual meeting to review how their endowment is doing. Just have development sitting in the meeting. They need to vote, they don't need to really do much, but just listen to the conversation. It's valuable for a donor to know that the development people that they're talking to pretty consistently are also people that are involved in that investment process. That stewardship level goes up in that type of scenario. Again, I can't emphasize enough stories. Stories are really, really helpful in this process. Should the manager be talking to your donors? So this is an interesting thing. In my situation, I can tell you that there was a family that gave a restricted gift. So this wasn't just a general gift, it was a restricted gift to a nonprofit. And they really want to know every year how well that gift is doing. And inevitably, after we meet with them, there's another gift that comes in. So if you can reinforce that they're making a big impact, there are other gifts out there. And they were big gifts. They were in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. It was a great, great system. And for that nonprofit, it really, really helped. Even if it's a restricted gift, that's fine because it takes pressure off the budget from some other place. Right? It's okay. Restricted isn't bad at all. And be conversant about the fiduciary difference. If your development folks can talk about the prudence and the fiduciary responsibility of the management of the endowment, that's going to make the donor feel better. Most people that are writing big checks, they know what that means. And they know the difference in that. And if you can just recognize it, and then your development folks can just talk about it a little bit, again, they don't have to be experts. They just have to touch on it. I think that makes a really big difference in terms of how you build it. Ask for bigger gifts. Right? I have seen in my experience with helping these other nonprofits that as you implement some of these things, the confidence level of development goes up. Now, I'll be honest with you, for most development people, their confidence is pretty high. They do a tough job and they're out there telling a lot of stories. But this is just another tool that can help them understand the way a donor might be thinking, how they can actually put it all together and provide value for those folks. It's just a basic idea. It's as simple as asking a bunch of people to come to an investment meeting. They probably are a little frightened to come to in the first place because they think it's going to be boring. But it's our job as investment managers to make those meetings not boring. Okay, and to provide you with these tools. All right. Thank you, Pam. That's all I had. Appreciate everybody coming.
Thank you, Dave. That was so spot on. I think so spot on. I think that And Dave referenced an investment committee, you know, and that's important too, but let's be honest, sometimes as a nonprofit, your finance committee is your investment committee as well. It's a dual purpose. And you may or may not have the skills on that committee to help development, to match those two things. And I think it's so critical. And when we were talking about and brainstorming about this conference today, and Dave kind of threw that out there, I thought, I've heard nothing recently from our nonprofit sector, but we need development people, we need development people, we need development people. And it just seemed to me to make so much sense to just take that concept and, you know, pull those investment people into helping you with the development side of things, right? It's not always just about planning an event. That's exhausting. I would never want to be a development person, by the way. Anyway, moving on to our next section. Our next section is going to be presented by Tim Snyder with Young Conway. Tim, a great friend of the firm. And I think I first met Tim because he was on the board of a nonprofit that was our client. So I know he gives tremendously back to the community. So he's going to talk about how to be resilient when things go wrong. I can't wait to hear this. Do you want to stand?
Good morning, everyone in this room and everyone on live stream. Pam forgot to mention that I also umpired her son's baseball games. So I learned very early in private practice of the importance of accountants to their clients. I was given a seminar on employment law, speaking about employee benefits, and during the break, I was talking to a CPA, and I asked her, well, why are you here? Are you responsible for human relations work at your firm? And she said, no, my clients expect me to know this stuff. So they're your first line of defense, and we recognize that, and we work with them on a regular basis, and during your audit, you may get a surprise bill from your lawyers because your accountants asked for a legal letter and didn't tell you about it. So in any event, I want to talk about some situations where volunteers may be protected from liability, and your ability to use this protection from liability as a recruiting tool for these individuals. Now, most of you are aware of limited liability if you're a corporate, if you're owner of a corporation or shareholder of a corporation, and that you believe that you're protected from liability. Well, you're not protected by the corporate shell or by the corporate shield if you're negligent. If you commit negligence in an act or negligence in supervision, you can be personally liable along with a corporation. So because of this potential liability, Delaware passed a law that shields volunteers and government workers from negligent liability. So if you commit as a volunteer or you commit a negligent or act or omission, and if it's in connection with your performing an activity that's in furtherance of the organization's exempt purpose, then you may be relieved from liability for the act. Now, who's a volunteer? Who's eligible for this exemption? So volunteers, trustees, ex officio trustees, directors, officers, agents, and workers engaged in an activity without compensation. So what does that tell us? So there's also government entities. So it's organizations that are exempt under 501c. It's not just 501c3, it's E4, 6s, 7s, any organization exempt under C. And you have to be engaged in furtherance of a purpose for which the organization is organized. So, example, a trade association is exempt under 501c7, and so those volunteers would be exempt as well. For example, a lot of trade organizations like to have crab feasts. So if somehow during the, as a fundraiser, so somehow during the crab feast, a volunteer does something that causes injury to somebody, they would be covered by this provision. And this protection also extends to government entities. As long as the action in which negligence occurs was in furtherance of government activity, such as I think, driving the bus. Guard employees are subject to this provision, but you'll see that their liability isn't strictly limited. So what is the activity? Is a decision, act, or event undertaken in furtherance of exempt purposes or a government function. And here, the law specifically points out that planning for sponsorship and conduct of a fundraising event for the benefit of one or more organizations is an activity. So it's not just if you're Meals on Wheels and you're taking food to somebody and you have an accident, that's covered. Also, if you're doing that crab feast and raising funds, that's covered as well. So it's the furtherance of the activities as well as fundraising. Now, your activity has to be conducted without compensation. So compensation is any form of remuneration, salary, fee, or otherwise paid for services. But it excludes access to services at no cost or at a reduced cost from the organization, reimbursement for costs actually incurred, and salary paid to ex officio board members or volunteers if job duties include serving as ex officio. So ex officio, I have partners who don't understand what ex officio means. What ex officio means is that if you're the executive director of an organization and the bylaws of the organization say that as the executive director, you are a member of the board of directors, which wouldn't be good practice, but let's just use that as an example. If you are a voting member of a board of directors, then you are serving in an ex officio capacity. So any position where you hold the position and that position entitles you to serve in another capacity, that's considered ex officio. So if you're the executive director getting paid for working for the organization as the ED, and you also volunteer as a board or otherwise volunteering through the organization out in the field, then that individual would be covered by the statute, notwithstanding that they are compensated by the organization for their services. Now, this is not absolute immunity. If you do something willfully or wantonly, or if you're grossly negligent, you can be held liable for your actions. And if there's a suit for operation of an automobile, you're taking these meals to Meals on Wheels, and you have a collision with your car, you're using your personal car or you're using an organization's car, and if there is automobile insurance on this car, liability insurance, then you will be personally liable up to the extent of the insurance. Now, just because of this rule exempts you from liability doesn't mean that you're exempted from having your actions examined and having a court determine, a jury determine whether or not you were negligent. Because if you were negligent, even though you may not be personally liable, the organization is still liable for your negligence under the theory of respondeat superior. The organization put you out there to conduct an activity and something went awry. So the organization can still be liable. And so, this isn't going to negate the need for liability insurance. You still need to have liability insurance at the organization level and for your employees. Now, another area where you can protect your volunteers is protecting them from the trust fund recovery penalty. Now, as you probably know, that if an individual is responsible for withholding taxes from employees' pay and paying those taxes over to the government and fails to do so, that person is a so-called responsible person and is liable personally for the unpaid withheld taxes. So responsible persons are those people who make the decisions on who gets paid, have check signing authority, sign checks, are on the check signing card with the bank. Those people are all considered responsible persons. So what we want to do is we want to try to make sure that volunteers who serve in a capacity that as treasurer are not going to be held liable by the IRS for these taxes. Now, there's an IRS policy statement, and unlike the statute that we just discussed, this is a policy statement. It's not binding on the IRS, and they depend on facts and circumstances. But what the policy says is that the penalty will not be imposed on unpaid volunteer members of any board of trustees or directors of an organization referred to as Section 501. So here it's Section 501, not just 501c. So it could be organization under other sections of 501. And if the individual is serving solely in an honorary capacity, well, what does that mean as an honorary capacity? Well, you have someone who's appointed as a treasurer, and that their responsibility is to review the financials and present them to the board on a regular basis and interface with the auditors. And as a result of being in an honorary capacity, they're not participating in the day-to-day financial operations of the organization. And here's, this is a little and/or situation. The individual does not have knowledge of the failure on which such penalty is imposed. So having that or in there, it seems like you could not satisfy the second or third bullet, but if you satisfy the third bullet, you would be exempt from liability. But anyway, the best way to ensure that your treasurer does not get held liable for these penalties is make sure that they don't sign the checks. They're not on the check signing card with the bank, and that they don't decide who gets paid on a day-to-day basis from the organization. And certainly, I think having knowledge is important because the board should be aware of the fact that trust fund taxes aren't being paid, and should admonish the people who are responsible for paying these things to pay over to the IRS. Now, another area that the IRS is emphasizing these days, and which the corporate philosophers are emphasizing as well, is conflicts of interest. Now, conflicts of interest could result in private annulment. And private annulment is one of the prohibitions of a tax-exempt organization. Private annulment is where the assets of the entity inure to the benefit of a private individual, whether that individual is an officer of the corporation, employee of the corporation, a director, or just a unrelated third party. Annulment will result in the loss of your tax-exempt status. So you want to make sure that you don't have any private annulment. So one of the ways to ensure that your decisions at the board level don't result in private annulment is to have a conflict of interest policy. And seems like tax-exempt boards, even though people are serving mostly without compensation, seems like tax-exempt boards are held to a higher standard than what for-profit boards are, and that's because you have an obligation to the public. You're receiving tax-exempt money, and so that carries a certain responsibility with it. So the purpose of the conflict of interest policy is to prevent decision makers from taking action that benefits themselves, their family, or businesses that they may be involved in. So the IRS helps us out here because they have, as an appendix to their instructions to the Form 1023, they have a form of conflicts of interest policy. Now, you go online, you can find plenty other examples of conflict of interest policies, but if you don't mind using what the IRS is providing, then that gives you a leg up if the IRS ever comes in and questions your conflict of interest policy. So under this policy, you have an interested person, and an interested person is someone who has a financial interest in a transaction that the board is going to consider. So when this arises under the IRS's conflict of interest policy, that individual has a duty to disclose to the board that there may be a conflict of interest. And then, according to the IRS procedure under this conflict of interest policy, at that point, the individual should leave the room, and the remaining members of the board or the committee should have a discussion to determine whether or not what's been revealed is truly a conflict of interest. And if it is a conflict of interest, then there needs to be some further analysis. You need to look at the transaction itself. And even though the person may be interested in the transaction, may have an interest in it, is this the best deal that the organization can get? So what you would want to do in that situation is perhaps do an RFP to see if other organizations that don't have a conflict could give you the same services or goods or whatever it is you're seeking to purchase at the same or better price. And if that's not the case, then under this procedure, it is permissible to enter into the transaction with the interested party, but you're doing it with eyes wide open. And if this is the case, what you need to do is you need to document in your corporate minutes what occurred, who spoke up, who voted, who recused themselves, to make sure that there's no question that you took the appropriate actions in this case. Now, however, that applies to transactions for goods or services. If the situation is compensation, if the interested person is receiving compensation from the organization, then that person is precluded totally from giving any recommendations or voting on any compensation for that person or other persons in the organization. Also, the IRS procedure includes a provision that suggests that you have an annual statement signed by the decision makers, that they're aware, they've received a copy of the policy, they're aware of the policy, and that in the last year, they haven't made any conflicted decisions. Okay, at this time, I think I'll terminate used up my time, so I'll terminate the program. Any questions before I leave? Okay, thank you so much, and have a good day.
Thank you so much. I'll just echo that. If you, first, let's hope you have a conflict of interest policy at your organization, but I do know that frequently we find that our nonprofits do have those policies in place, but they don't always ask their board members to sign them every year. It really is something that you need to be doing on an annual basis, especially for board members that may be coming in or going off. Very important. You don't want to find yourself in a situation where you have conflict. Of course, no nonprofit ever wants to be in the newspaper, right? Of course, if one is, you all are. So we all know that's a fact as well. Okay, so we had scheduled a break, but we're a little bit behind. I think we took an extended break the last time. So if it's okay with everyone, let's continue on so that we kind of get everybody end up where we're supposed to end up by the end of the day. And if you need to step out, of course, I think that's fine. We're in a group here. If you're online, don't move. I'm just kidding. Well, you want to be able to participate in the next presentation. So the next presentation is fostering resilience in the accounting function. So we have Angela Coaxum up next with your part-time controller. And certainly, I know what she does every day probably gets more calls than any of us about, oh my goodness, we need some help right now. Can you get here quickly, right? With that, Angela, I'll let you take it.
All righty, thank you, Pam. Hello, everyone. Great, thank you. So you can go ahead to the next slide just to tell you a little bit about YPTC. We've been in business for 30 years. We provide professional services for nonprofits, financial management for nonprofits. That's kind of what we're here to do. A couple of things we don't do. We don't do audits. We leave that to Barbara Kane Thornton. We don't do taxes. We don't give legal advice. We don't give investment advice. So, very happy to be here in this forum with all of these other experts who are giving you that great advice, and we refer to them for that. So, wanted to talk with you today about a resiliency story as it relates to nonprofits. So, okay, so I was going to slide those in, but we can go ahead and we can go back one. Yep. Okay. So here's the story. So once upon a time, there was a parent of a small child, which you can see there in the first box, who, despite working full time, had little money left over after paying for daycare and buying groceries. So this parent relied on, and I want to be clear here, this is a completely fictional nonprofit that I'm talking about here today. So this parent relied on a local nonprofit to assist with access to food on weeks when the money was tight. And this local nonprofit was a source of pride within the community. It provided fruits and vegetables and other nutritional staples to families that were in need. And on many occasions, the staff members, and we're kind of up to that third box now, the staff members would personally deliver items to the community members who didn't have a means to travel to the food pantry. And in turn, the nonprofit itself relied on the members of the community for donations to support its mission of reducing food scarcity. Lastly, in turn, the nonprofit relied on its board members and its management to ensure that the operations ran smoothly, that strategic plans were in place, and that donors were provided evidence of the entity's fiscal responsibility. So in order to assess operations, to project future needs, and analyze results, the board and management relied on timely financial reports. You can see those. You see the board there and then the reports. But when the pandemic hit, and those reports were prepared by the entity's finance department, but when the pandemic hit in March of 2020, those financial reporting needs increased for the organization. The nonprofit needed daily cash reports. They needed payroll reports for applying for the payroll, the Paycheck Protection Program loans, and additional reporting for the loan forgiveness, as well as the employee retention credits. And this required that accounting department to coordinate with the payroll providers, with the banks, with their auditors, and with others to provide all of that information. So in other words, the entity relied on the accounting department's ability to overcome adversity throughout the pandemic. So making sense of those PPP loan rules, as we talked about with Dave and Connie, coordinate discussion with their bankers and their auditors, and not to mention to meet the demands of the additional reporting needs. So in short, this accounting department needed to be resilient. We can go on to the next slide. So we've had a couple of different definitions of resiliency here today. I think this one is pretty similar. Basically, it's an ability to recover from or adjust easily to adversity or change. And I've included here a quote from Gene Chatsky, which I think encapsulates my thought, at least on resiliency. Resilience isn't a single skill. It's a variety of skills and coping mechanisms. To bounce back from bumps in the road, as well as failures, you should focus on emphasizing the positive. And I'm all about positivity. I can find the silver lining in any situation. So I feel like that's really important. But in a nutshell, resilience is the capacity to recover from difficult life events. And putting this into the perspective of our work life, from an accountant perspective, what are the things that we can do that help ensure that our team remains equipped to address each day and meet and complete the work that's needed for our work? So I want to speak to you today about a couple of skills and coping mechanisms that we can employ within the accounting function to ensure we're able to bounce back from those hard times. So this includes getting up to speed quickly on new accounting and IRS guidance. As Jeff talked about earlier, certainly those the changes in lease accounting, changes that we encountered a couple of years ago with regard to contribution reporting. Those are things that we need to stay on top of. I think coming to sessions like this give us a leg up and some ability to be able to adapt and apply learnings from the different professionals who are here. Exploring software solutions. So when the pandemic hit, we've seen a lot of organizations that turn to things like Bill.com, Concur, Expensify, ways to streamline your process, moving through electronics, being able to have online authorizations and payments on bill pay. Timesheet management apps, I think, have become much more popular and much more useful for organizations, especially with increased reporting requirements. Timesheets have become much more useful, much more required within a lot of organizations. So the extent that you can do that online, have your employees fill that out, have it linked into your payroll system, as well as your accounting system, is really beneficial. Third item is cross-training for each function. We really can't emphasize that enough. Being in a position to have multiple people within your organization, and I know it really depends on the size of your organization and the size of your staff, but if you think about it, if you only have one person within your organization who's able to run your payroll, how much pressure does that put on that one person to show up for work every day, to be present and able? But if somebody else in your department were cross-trained on how to do payroll, say your accounts payable person could run payroll and your payroll person could run accounts payable, if necessary, then that relieves a lot of stress off of that person. And that actually helps with the resiliency factor for folks. But it also enables the organization to be more resilient because things don't stop. You can continue to move forward. You have a plan in place. We talked about having the knowledge and expertise to process nonprofit accounting transactions. Those are changing continuously. Understanding compliance requirements for federal, state, and local needs, and access to networks for support with specialized topics and information. Again, forums like this, the ability to tap into the knowledge base of your accountants and other providers, your auditors, is really helpful. We can move on. So this pyramid, we like to look at the accounting and financial reporting function as a pyramid. And basically, as you can see here, there are a number of things that are required within the accounting function in an organization. So we look at the base where we're doing those transactional things. We're doing payroll, we're doing accounts payable, we're managing all of the cash of the organization. That's kind of what I look at as the blocking and tackling within any accounting function. You want to make sure those things are done right, but you also want to make sure that those folks have support. Again, cross-training, having a backup for that. From there, we're looking at the controller positions. Those are the folks who are closing the books. They're doing the reconciliation. They're preparing those basic financial statements. Where we've got our statement of financial position, our statement of activity, our statement of cash flows, and getting that information together. And then up top, we have our CFO, or our more transformative activities that are occurring, where we're doing the variance analysis and we're explaining what the numbers mean Maybe we're doing some data visualization. We're meeting with the board and with management, translating those financial statements. We're looking at the budgeting and the cash flow and forecasting for the organization. So it's really important to understand resiliency within the organization really requires staff to be experienced and knowledgeable across all of these areas, and always recognizing that there's probably not going to be one person in the organization who's able to do all of these functions. But you do need to have someone who can address each of those. So that might fall to multiple people in the organization. A couple of things we want to make sure that our staff members have expertise and background in, but it's also things that might change within the organization. So the volume of transactions that need to occur, the complexity of the record keeping within the organization, the systems and the technology complexities. Those are all things that are going to combine to determine kind of what skill sets you need within your organization. And then once you have an idea of what those skill sets are, what you already have in place as far as addressing each of these skill sets here, then you can determine what do you need to fill those gaps and where do you need to backfill within the organization. So what we have here is a list of some of the more common challenges that nonprofits face at some point in the organization's lifetime. And some of these were touched on by a couple of the presenters already, but one in particular, unplanned transition. So this is something that we're certainly seeing as we're experiencing the Great Resignation. People are changing positions, they're leaving, they're completely getting out of accounting and doing something completely different. We've seen a lot of certainly executive director transitions over the last couple of years. So that's something that organizations are dealing with on an ongoing basis. We talked about the complex transactions that we have to deal with within nonprofits. And then small organizations or startups are going to deal with different issues than established nonprofit organizations. So it's always important to understand that not all organizations are alike, even if they're kind of within the same space of working. Some are in startup mode, some are smaller, some are larger, and they have different issues that they have to address. Budgeting within every organization. Budgeting is key. We need to know kind of what's coming in, what's going out, and what's our plan for it. So from an operational, a capital, as well as a program specific and even grant specific purpose, we need to look at budgeting. Scenario planning is something that organizations really do have to have kind of a mindset for and make sure that they are resilient in that regard to determine what does the organization need to do in the future. So if the board determines kind of from a strategic planning perspective that they want to go in a different direction, that they want to operate some different programs or identify different revenue sources, we need to be able to produce those scenarios, identify the analysis, what's that going to mean for the organization, what benefits, what threats or opportunities are there with that. And then plan growth for the organization, similarly, making sure that the tools are there and we're considering that. And I think we've talked about succession planning, but again, making sure that there are, again, with the cross-training, making sure that we're considering what skill sets do we have on board within the organization to say if someone does leave, what does that mean for the organization? So each nonprofit does need to consider how each of these challenges can or will impact the organization. Again, and if we have the right resources and human capital with the right skill sets, then all of these things can be met in-house. Any of these changes can be met in-house with a little planning, looking ahead. But if you're not able to do that, or if you're caught off guard, then one thing you might want to consider is outsourcing for the organization. And this chart just gives some ideas on how outsourcing might benefit the organization if you are caught in a position where you haven't planned for a transition, or you have not, you don't have the necessary skill sets currently in-house to address the concerns that you might have. So I won't go through each of those in detail, but I believe these slides will be available. So you can refer back to those. But again, the focus here is looking to see what you do have in-house, improving those skill sets as you go along to make sure that you can address the areas that do come up. But then if you're not able to do that, then look externally to see how you can fill those gaps. So the best way, of course, to navigate through any change that the organization is going through, whether it's planned or it's unplanned, is to prepare for it in advance. You always want to have a good plan in place. So creating resiliency within your team starts with having a good plan in place. Looking at the key action items here, you want to make sure you know what your people are doing. So what tasks are assigned to each person within your organization. You want to know what you want and need them to do. Sometimes what people are doing are not necessarily what you expect them to be doing or what you need them to be doing. So you need to have that documented as well. And then you also need to know what people are capable of. Sometimes we're putting people in positions that they're not really capable of thriving in. And we want to make sure that we're matching those skill sets with our expectations of our staff. And then document. We always want to make sure that we are documenting our procedures. We're documenting each one of those key action items so that we know, what skill sets do we have, what skill sets do we need, and how do we get there? So when you have that inevitable situation where someone is unavailable for whatever reason, that you can make sure that, again, you have that plan in place. You're not overstressing your staff. You're providing those professional development opportunities so that they can build the skill sets that they need to be able to thrive within the organization. And I think that was my last slide that I have, unless there's any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you, Angela. And to your earlier point, yes, all the slides will be made available to every participant today, but I really appreciated your presentation. I think that for the nonprofit community, everyone knows and recognizes, even since the pandemic, they recognize even more that the need continues to grow. The need continues to grow. And then all of these things that are happening in our world, losing staff, how much donors are responding to help their communities is putting so much pressure on the finance and accounting functions within an organization. People don't generally think nonprofits, they need a good accounting function. And that, those of you who are finance people know I'm preaching to the choir. There's nothing more important than a good finance function within your organization. So great presentation. Certainly nice to look at it from the resiliency lens, not the panic, right? So hopefully there were some tips there along the way. Our next speaker is just living resiliency today, I have to say. So Ray Abbott with WSFS. If you're a nonprofit in Delaware, I know you're partnered with WSFS because honestly, they support the community like nobody else, and including helping with our event today. They've been a partner of ours with this event every year since we started it. Ray, and I'm sure he'll share with you, was earlier today in Philadelphia with his whole team, packing food packages. I'll let him tell you about it, and then run down the road to be here to be able to talk to you about cash flow, okay? Because he knows it's important, and because he is who he is, and he represents WSFS, one of the strongest organizations that we have, I think, in the state of Delaware when it comes to supporting the community. So Ray, we're thrilled that you could make it and that you got her safe and sound. What's her name?
I guess. What's better? Do you have, does this work? This works. Okay. Resiliency. Okay, number one. Angela, that was a great presentation. My topic is going to be cash flow action tips during a pandemic and beyond. If you look at the prior slide, that's about 5 or 10 years ago. I'm not sure that picture that was up there. So resiliency, you got to have certain things, right? So that is not me. Thank you for your patience. There you go. I have a little bit less hair and I have some gray from the pandemic. So there you have it. My goal today is really just to want to thank you. In the past, we've had presentations here and we've gone over things like fraud, don't click on the link, think before you click. Some people want a couple prizes on that. I think we had enough of that, and I know that's very important. I got some slides in here, and that does affect cash flow if you do it wrong. So again, thank you for your time today. I was spending some time with my entire team with a nonprofit up in Philadelphia, just sorting through food and things like that. So if there's anyone in this group, I have about 15 on my team. And if you're looking for a team of enthusiastic people to help with the organization, I'd be happy to take a look at that. Cash flow, that's free. So there's no strings attached. It's free work. The bank is really good with that. They give us 4 hours per person per month, and we do a lot of that. So we call Team Wispis. That's the shirt that has some gross avocado stuff on it right now. So, okay, to the next slide. All right, this is a cash flow. If you remember your accounting days, accounting 101, cash flow is really, really important. And you'll see two colors on this slide that are very important. Green is for cash coming in, and red is for cash going out. So on the left side, you'll see cash receipts, and then you have accounts receivable. You turn that into cash. In this case, you might have pledges, donors, grants, things like that. That is green. So you'll see on the bottom slide here a big green bar. Green is cash coming in. Red, you don't want to be in the red. That's cash going out, but certainly you have monies leaving, and you want to balance these things so you have enough cash to pay your bills. And Angela was doing a great job. I was listening, thinking back on some of my accounting days on cash flow, but this is a cash conversion cycle for an organization. And you want to make sure that the cash is coming in, that there's enough to pay your bills, and then they have receipts coming in. And budgeting's pretty key. You touched on that. Next slide, please. Don't worry, I only have about 100 slides before lunch. Okay, so on the bottom of this slide, you'll see a green bar and a red bar. That means that this slide affects both cash disbursements, the red, and cash receipts coming in. So the purpose of this slide covers a lot of things. It's banking technology, and during the pandemic, you might have noticed that everything shut down. Okay, I run a cash management group at the bank, and we have about 10 people or so just dealing with customers, getting them set up on electronic means of getting cash into the bank. So not so much having a branch, so branches worked, but during the middle of the pandemic, not only were we giving PPP loans to a lot of nonprofits and companies, great for cash flow, right? If somebody hands you $2 trillion, you're going to be okay. We did fine during the pandemic. It was a lot of hard work, but what that meant to me, time management, I had to give up 3 of my people to do PPP loans. Talk about resiliency. At the same time, everybody wanted to get set up electronically. How do I get the checks in the bank? Hey, I don't have anybody coming in the office. How am I going to get the checks? How's the money going to come in? Well, we use electronic methods such as ACH, auto debit, auto tithing. How do we bring that money in? So somebody promises to pull money in. There are ways to do that cheaply. Credit card, there'll be you have to pay those merchant services fees. With ACH, you do not. It's just a debit to the accounts. So that's a little bit less expensive. Some businesses don't like giving out their account number. Okay,
your checking account number and things like that. So you want to make sure those types of things are safe. But we saw a big spike of that during the beginning of the pandemic, the first couple of months of it especially. We saw a 40% increase in production volume of electronic payments, meaning my team was setting up, they were working at a higher production level with 3 less people. Hey, you do what you have to do. Teams, Microsoft Teams, saved everybody a tremendous amount of time. So anything electronically, and with your banking, that means mobile check capture, as simple as that might seem. You can take a picture of the check. If you have high volumes of check, you scan them. If you're not using those types of services and you have checks, that's a way that you eliminate the trips to the bank, and it saves a lot of time. And if there's a lot of germs all over the place, the only germs are the ones right in front of you. So those types of services are really good. They get the money in the bank quickly. ACH, we touched on that a little bit. Wire transfers, that's a quick way to make immediate payments. So it's a little bit faster in the form of a wire coming in and a wire going out. I saw a lot of that with grants and disbursements of grants during the middle of the pandemic from places like the United Way, federal government. A lot of those disbursements were not made by check. What am I missing here? I'm turning around. I should probably look at my slideshow instead of the screen. So, cash, the banks have seen a huge decline in cash, and everyone's going cashless. No surprise. What about if you have large amounts of cash? For nonprofits, I would think there probably isn't a whole lot of cash transactions, but sometimes you might. The branches certainly are open, and we have these things called smart safes that a lot of entities are using, like Wawa's and Sheets and things like that. A lot of fast food places are using that. Next slide, please. Okay, money coming in. See that big green bar coming in? Cash flow, receivables, that's green. You want money coming in. So, invoice electronically. We heard that from your part-time controller. There's a lot of innovation with a lot of these softwares that are out there to invoice electronically, pledge receivables, do that electronically if and all possible. Most softwares allow for that, even QuickBooks, but old-fashioned way, I even saw simple means like an email and things like that for the smaller places, but QuickBooks and a lot of these softwares will allow for that. And it's invoicing electronically rather than paper was critical during the pandemic. Okay, when you're making your payments or when you're requesting deposits, offer discounts if possible, but it's a nonprofit community here, so you probably don't want to offer discounts. You want to ask for more. Next slide, please. Credit policies. Well, I would say during the pandemic, there were receivables with a lot of pledges. Maybe some of those didn't come through. Just be careful when you're predicting your budgeting. Like there might be some that don't come through, especially during hard times. We're on the brink of a recession, some say, and that you don't want to always count on the monies to come in the way you think they might, but you just have to have some type of an allowance for that. And your accountants help you out with that, right, Pam? So pledge receivables, 100% is going to come in, but it just depends. The state and federal governments certainly they might have a higher percentage than individuals, but you have to keep that in mind. I'm looking at my notes here. Okay, when you're paying vendors, you always want to take advantage of discounts. And you don't want to pay late and have late fees and things like that. ACH will allow, if you're paying your bills electronically, ACH will allow you to pick the effective date. So don't pay early, just pay on the day it's due. And you can predict out your cash flows and budget accordingly. What if you don't have enough money? Does everyone have a line of credit? How about credit cards? If you don't, doesn't mean you have to borrow from your line of credit. So think about that. You want to have liquidity in the form of a line of credit in case some receivables might not come through. If your pledges don't come through, if somebody's slow in paying, there's been a lot of slow payments, and the slow pays might not because they don't have the money. It might be because people don't come into the office to pay. So, well, you still have to make your bills and you're counting on the money to come in. Well, what if the government didn't pay you in a timely manner? What if there's a delay? You want to have some type of means, a nest egg. If you don't have it in your cash accounts or your investments, what if your investments are tied up? I saw the agenda earlier, I missed it, but I would imagine that now that interest rates are on the rise, there's some opportunities to get higher yields that are out there. If you go longer, like 6 months, 9 months out, even 3 months out, you can get higher yields. And it might even be treasuries, not even bank deposits, but certain types of investments. Well, what if those are tied up and there'll be a penalty if you have to recoup that? You got to budget this and make sure that the money's there to make your bills. Okay, slide 10. Kind of move a little bit quicker here. Budget and planning, forecast, plan, and prepare. Let me skip through that. There you go. Forecast. We heard that a little bit ago from Angela. You want to make sure that you're forecasting and predicting your cash flows coming in, your cash flows going out. But again, if you don't have enough in your cash account to pay your bill, maybe it's a good time to consider a line of credit, or even have some credit card options available that can delay the payments. The planning and preparing is critical, and not just for the financials, but for the people. I've seen cases where people get sick unexpectedly. That impacts your cash flow. So having a backup and having people that know what to do, that's pretty critical. What if the person can't come in the office? What if they don't have the access? A lot of things can happen with people, and especially with cash, you want to have backups and so on. Okay, fraud prevention. Bob the Evil Hacker is not here this year. All right? We all remember, right? We all remember Bob the Evil Hacker. Bob the Evil Hacker is very, very active. If Bob the Evil Hacker is successful, that can have a very damaging effect on your cash flow. Now, we had Bob the Evil Hacker here how many years in a row? Like 3 or 4? Yeah, the last one really scared me because they used the social media tricks to find out about people, and the hackers were finding out a lot of sensitive information about people just by going on. People are putting all sorts of crazy things on Facebook and LinkedIn, and people can guess where you are, what you're doing, if you're overseas, and they can then craft an email to trick you and your staff. And I would always say, especially with wires and electronic payments, if you get an instruction to change an account number or change where you're sending it, like, what's the #1 thing anyone can do? I'm going to ask the audience here. There might be a prize. Angela, call him. Angela wins a prize. Nothing beats a phone call, especially when you're changing the instructions of where the money goes. So pick up the phone and talk to people. I know it seems kind of hard in this day and age. Everything's electronic. It's moving quickly. But what if you can't get a hold of somebody? Then what? Most of the time, the email address is wrong. But okay, now you're trying to call them, the email address is wrong. And people start getting aggressive on email. Karen, I got to pay right now. Right now. Yeah. Do nothing, right? Do nothing until you hear from them. Most people will understand. I don't know anybody that would not understand. If you were concerned about sending money, and even if it was legitimate, and they're putting pressure on you, like, hey, I got to hear your voice, right? So that's really, really critical. So when we see Bob the Evil Hacker the next time around, you have to tell him I said this, but it's really critically important. We used to see things like this at my bank maybe once a year, then it became once a month. This is an everyday type of thing. People are getting tricked all day long by phishing, and maybe always have an open door policy. And I've seen some organizations do some tests, where they hire a firm to do that and just say, hey, will you click on this link? Sometimes they look pretty legit. And when somebody clicks on it and they shouldn't, and it's a test, don't put them in the penalty box. You just have a coaching opportunity with your staff, right? You don't want your staff to be afraid of you, because you want to have an open door policy. And if they do make mistakes, you want them to approach you, because if they're afraid to call you when someone's trying to hack into their account, you want that phone call if you're the boss in the corner, right? So I think that concludes my 15 minutes. How did I do? I was trying to move quickly. Any questions?
I'm going to say something really good about it. Yes, I think we can deal with it. What's really nice is I know one thing that's out there. We have, we get warned that there's an ACH coming out of our account, which is really nice, because a lot of times it comes to myself, and it also comes to our executive director. And if I'm not there, she can see it and she'll say, hey, what is this payment? Or what is this for? And they can approve it or not approve it. That's really important, because my personal account got hacked in May. And I was very sick, so they took over $2,000 for me personally. But that stops, because the bank is so proactive about that, it stops them from hackers from getting money from you. I no longer have that account where that money.
Yes.
I changed it, but anyway.
Thank you for that comment. The name of those services, and everyone in this room should have heard of these services. It's called Check Positive Pay for checks, and ACH Positive Pay for ACH. And basically all that does is, for a check, when you issue your checks, say like on a Friday, you send a file to the bank. Here's a list of checks, here are the payees, here are the amounts. And now the bank has a list of those payments. And checks, they still exist, believe it or not, but send a list to the bank and have a positive pay service. We don't clear those checks unless they're on your list. Well, what happens if somebody takes the check, they steal the mail, they duplicate a check, whatever it might be? There's a lot of check fraud. They catch Leonardo DiCaprio in Catch Me If You Can. Okay, that's been going on for years and years. But positive pay will prevent this from occurring. And if you don't have it, you should talk to your bank about that. So I appreciate that comment. ACH positive pay, very similar thing. You record your trusted vendors Maybe it's your payroll company, like an ADP or Paychecks or part-time controller. Do you pay payroll? No. But there are different payroll companies that are out there, and they will debit your account and then pay out of their account. Oftentimes they do it that way. And that would be a trusted vendor. So there'll be two buttons on our positive pay service. Green is, yes, they're good, and you do that once, and then they're good ongoing. Or you can do a one-time green, it's good. But anything that's an exception just jumps out. You have to approve those every day. So that's called ACH positive pay. So if you don't have that service, I would talk to your bank about that. So it's not just check fraud, it's ACH fraud as well. Because you only have a few days to turn those types of things around before the money ends up in someone else's hands.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ray. That was great. That was very good. I think that one of the themes that is coming out of today is it's a good thing to move forward with all of these different types of options that are available to you. We're no longer where you did your own bookkeeping and you did everything in-house and you didn't take advantage of any of these services. And when they first came out, they were very, very expensive, and only those people who could really afford it. But I think it's becoming a necessity now. So thanks again, Ray. Thanks for getting here. We appreciate it.
Sorry for my attire.
No, you're great. You're great. We can see that you're resilient in action. Love it. Love it. Okay, so we're getting close on time. We want to make sure we have a great lunch for everyone. So we're going to have one more presentation, and then with that, we're going to wrap up. We're going to have lunch. That's going to leave one presentation from Mallard Financial. We're going to send that out to every single one of you and everyone that's online, because I know people have other commitments, and Joe was gracious to say, we'll talk to everybody. And I think he and Carol would talk to everybody in here if they haven't already, because I think they've talked to at least everyone in the room. And so, but we want to bring Carol Housel up next. Carol is with the Delaware Business Times and Today Media, and she is going to send us off on some marketing highs, right, Carol?
Let's go. Wake up.
Here we go, right before lunch.
I was freezing back there, so I'm happy I can move. And I don't know about you, but my hands are cold. So thank you so much, Pam, for letting me have a chance to speak to you. I know a lot of friendly faces are in here that I've met before, so makes me feel comfortable and at ease, which is lovely. Just off the top, anyone can call me. You don't have to buy anything from me. I'm not going to be that person. I'm happy to consult if you're thinking of, what do I do? How do I do it? Where do I spend my money? Blah, blah, blah. I just want to say that up front. So see Houseel at DelawareBusinessTimes.com. I didn't do a pretty slide, but what a bad marketer I am. I should say that. Delaware, burn this in your brain, Delaware Business Times. We're part of Today Media, so we have Delaware Today, Mainline Today, The Hunt. We do a ton of events. We do tons of digital, connected TV, OTT, streaming audio. We are basically your agency for whatever you need. So little bit, lot, whatever you're into, we can probably help you. So I'm happy to give advice as well. I met Pam about 3 or 4 years ago now, and we just met and we just started developing a relationship and figuring out things slowly but surely, testing some things, trying some things. She's a big proponent of our Giving Guide, which is a nonprofit publication that's available. Several of you are participants in that, sponsors as well. So it's a great opportunity for you to showcase who you are, lead donors to how to donate to you, et cetera. If you're a corporation, you can sponsor a nonprofit, which is what Pam has done, and many of you others have also done as well. So commercial over. Thank you so much. My topic is trends and tips. So the trends prior to COVID. You did your thing, you did your marketing, you probably spent about, I should ask the question. Do all of you have a marketing budget? Nonprofits, good for you, awesome. Most most people should have about 2 to 5% of their sales revenue dedicated to marketing. And that marketing definition is individual to all of you. So perhaps you're putting it into developing your website or making your search engine optimization, more effective, and you're pushing yourself up, or you're doing a lot of Facebook ads, things like that. That is a good way to use your dollars. If you're trying to get maybe your email marketing up to speed with internal customers, MailChimp, Constant Contact, that kind of stuff, all great investments. So that I hope you're all doing that. I'm sure you are. If you're looking to get new customers, there's ways to get out there. Digital is the way. We all know now with COVID, email is key, but email is inundated. Have you all totally been blown away in your inbox? Swipe, delete, delete, delete. I mean, I'm I'm at it. I just go through my and I'm in the business. So I feel bad because I'm like, that poor guy worked hard on that email, but I'm not interested. So you really, the messaging and the subject lines are key. I am happy to help you with subject line testers, but you can get a free one. Google it, subject line tester, put it in, test it. It'll tell you if you are spam, you're going to be spammy and you're going to get stuck in the junk box. It'll tell you if you're using words that you may be a little bit too technical and aren't going to be received by the reader. The point of all of that is, you want to make sure your message gets opened, because obviously they're not going to know who you are. Bill, who was it? Yes, was it Bill that talked about relationships and storytelling? You're right on the money. I think most of us talked about storytelling. You all, especially as nonprofits, have a story to tell that is not just who you are, but what you do, because it's a personal relationship. And this is kind of based on a conversation we had, good old Pizza by Elizabeth luncheon. Pam said, we're so busy doing our thing. How do we engage with our customers and really try to have everyone in the company be a marketer? Because you don't probably have a dedicated marketing person. And a simple way to do it is to tell the story of who your customers are. So if Pam's out I'm using you, I'm sorry, but why not? So if Pam's out at her customer and she's, they've been a 10-year customer, she has a great relationship with them, she can say, Bob, do you mind if I could can we take a selfie in front of your sign? And would you mind if I post, how much we appreciate you for sticking with us, for, trusting us. And I'm sure they would be like, absolutely, I would love for that. And then you have the opportunity to not only put something on your own social media, you're showcasing them because they obviously want someone to know who they are. Maybe you build a little hashtag campaign where you're talking about customers, we love, or I don't know, I'm just brainstorming off, and do that. Every time your rep goes out, anybody in your company goes out and meets with a client, pull them in together, pull some kind of campaign together, just really tell your story of why you love your customers. It's always about them. I know it's easy to tell we're awesome and you need us. You need us. We're here because we want to tell you why you should use us. It's really about them, what you love about them and how you want to serve them. So that is my thing. I mean, what I do too is, I have every product in the world. I can tell you all about the products I have, but it doesn't matter if you don't need it, and it doesn't matter to you if it's not something you're going to be able to use for showcasing yourself. All right, so trending, all digital spending, just as a thing. Before COVID, budgets for things were 2 to 5%. It has skyrocketed up to 13% that digital spends went to over COVID. People were like, how do I get to people? I haven't, can't get in person. I can't, meet with them. We worked on Zoom. We've done, I don't know, how many of you have done the video email? Have you ever done a video email? Super awkward. We were trusted to do it. When you're sick of seeing yourself on Zoom anyway, and then you have to tape yourself and email them, we were trying everything to connect. Because like I said, emails, boring. It's all about video now. So video emails, video on YouTube, video on your social platforms, no more static. Moving pictures, they can be static pictures, but it's really, you have to engage people even more than just words, just a simple box with some tips of the day, or, and I know a lot of people love to like forward articles, which is great, but don't just do that. Like make sure there's pictures of like your team having a great time, or maybe one of your emails isn't asking for a thing. It's just like, we're thinking of you and, wanted to say hi, and yet all of you are waving, like just really, you have to kind of think like really weird, not weird, but out of the box ways to show them. I was speaking, you have a new branding to your company. What a great opportunity to be out and like video, maybe you're out helping a new customer. You may remember us as this, but now we're this, or you could do like a switcheroo sign. There's nothing, people love it because you may feel like you're being so, like, this is not who I am, but just try it. Like, just try to be natural, relatable, friendly, include others around you. So don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to do that. Wave at me when I have to stop, because I know I'm between lunch and everybody else, that's how it goes. Okay, so I talked about subject lines, focus on what you can solve for them, not what you have to offer. It's all about their pain, not what you have to solve their pain. My social media, I talked about that. Make it personal. Customer meetings, team activities. Like, how fun is that? They show you as a family. You show yourself as a family, and people relate to that, and they want to work with people that like have a great core internal relationship. Video brand. All right, good. Okay. Have any of you tried, let's see, influencer marketing? Do you have a friend who will promote you? I know we see the lady on like Instagram, she's selling her products. She's, this is the latest in hair dryers or whatever. Maybe you work together and you say, you know what, this is my friend Pam, and I want to introduce you to her because she has really helped me solve my problem X. Check her out, put a little link, that kind of stuff. That is huge. And that's a great way to support people, to lift each other up and help, build your nonprofit community, because it's hard out, it's hard. You all are working like 5 people in one person. So support one another. And I know you do. I'm speaking to the choir. I'm going to ask, I guess, a question. Does anyone have any questions about how to, I know search engine optimization is a big thing with nonprofits. How do we get people to find us, or how can we be recognized? Are you all doing Google Analytics, or are you tracking your like ROI is the big thing. Are you tracking people like coming to your websites? Any of that? I know this is like you're like, yeah. I would say if you're not doing that, look into setting that up on your websites, and your websites are key. I have worked with so many customers that say, I'm ready to do an email campaign. I'm ready to, promote our whatever. And I'll go to their website and I'll go, no, you're not. That website is awful. It's hard to read, or it doesn't click through, or it's just a bunch of words, it's not interactive, it's not, doesn't have video content. Check your websites out, make sure they are attractive, lots of pictures, not a lot of words. And don't make it hard if you are doing emails for them to get to you. A lot of companies have barriers. I had one customer that I worked with who was a furniture company, and he wanted to do a summer furniture sale. I said, great, we did the email campaign. He said, I got nobody. Like, well, your report says that like 800 people clicked through and they clicked on your website or whatever. And he goes, well, we didn't get anything. Turns out he had a double opt-in email. So they said yes, and then it said, okay, now enter all your information. And they're like, no, I'm not doing that. So don't make it hard for your customer to get to you. And he's like, I didn't even know I didn't even know that happened. And my marketer says that we can't turn that off. I said, fire her, turn it off. Don't fire her. I think she was like his daughter or something. No, but I said, yeah, you can turn it off, make it easy. You don't want a barrier to anything. I can go on and on and on, but I want you to know I have, and my friend Charlie at my office said, make sure you say print is not dead. Print is alive and well. The biggest thing you should do is have multi-channel marketing, have something in print, have something in email, have your website active, do social media. One trick ponies we know don't work. If anyone would like my book of lists, the famous book of lists, please come see me in the back. All right, that's enough for now. Thank you. Oh, wait, I got a question. I'm so excited. Yes, I have a calendar of events, free. Yes, let me tell you about the free stuff. I like that. We have a calendar of events. Go on DelawareBusinessTimes.com, and you can load it in yourself. If you have trouble, email me the stuff, and I will put it on, or tell the editor to put it on. The other thing you can do for free is if you have a people on the move, name change, something exciting coming that you feel would be newsworthy, let me know. Happy to do. I think the email's editor or news at Delaware Business Times, but you can still just email me. I got an in with the editor. So yeah. So yes, please, we're happy to help. We want you guys to rise up. You're serving us all, and we thank you. Thank you, Pam.
Thank you. Thank you. Are we hashtagging? My husband always makes that joke now, the television commercial with the hashtag. Are we hashtagging? Okay, so we're about to wrap up. There's just one more thing I want to do before we say goodbye to our audience at home and have lunch. And that is just to make mention of a couple of really, really special people. So about 34 or so years ago, when I was 12, I came here to Delaware, and one of the very first clients that I went to work on was Child Inc. I'm sure most of you in this room know Child Inc. It's a huge organization. They do tremendously good things, and they have a lot of grant funding. And I know that because I had to do their audit, and it was just mind-boggling. There was a woman there, her name was Gail Allegra, and she was their business manager, and she was everything. I learned so much from Gail Allegro, not just about accounting for nonprofits, right? But also just about how to be a terrific person. And Gail, if any of you ever knew Gail, she did everything. I mean, she had a grant accounting down to like minutia. She was just incredible. And she recently retired. She wasn't able to be here today. I did kind of reach out. But we just want to say thank you to Gail for what she did to the nonprofit community, really from a financial perspective, because she set the bar for anybody and everybody. And I'm sure she taught many people through the years because she was just that kind of person. And then the other person I wanted to kind of mention, I'm going to get to pick on because they actually are here, because we have another person in the state of Delaware with many years of experience I only met Karen Geyer a few years ago when we became the auditors for People's Place. But I can tell you, the first time I met Karen and went in to work on the audit for People's Place, once again, I soon found a kindred spirit in someone who really takes it so seriously, works tirelessly, does so much, can account for grants like nobody's business. I mean, it doesn't matter how many ways you need to know about how to account for things. Karen's got it. She's got all the answers. And Karen will be retiring this year before we have our next presentation. So Karen, we're going to call you out. We have a couple of things for you. Come on up here. From your friends at Barbicane. Congratulations. Oh, of course. I know, I was trying. Here's a little gift card for you and a mug so you don't forget us.
Don't you worry, this will get used a lot.
Okay, and with that, I think we have lunch in the hallway maybe? Thanks everyone for coming. We totally appreciate the fact that you were here. Thanks those of you who are online and joined us. And we will be sending follow-up of all the information and the presentation if you'd like to share it with others at your organization. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, you might put it back in this.
I can't read it now.
You can't read.
I don't have my glasses.